Chapter 7. Codename. You may call me the Fool. The brief response quickly faded in the grand temple shrouded in mist. Yet the echo lingered long in the hearts of Audrey and Alger, stirring ripples upon ripples. It was an unexpected but fitting nickname, perfectly encapsulating images of mystery, power, and strangeness. After a few seconds of silence, Audrey stood up, slightly lifted her skirt, bent her knees, and curtsied to Steve. Dear Mr. Fool, may I be so bold as to ask if you would witness our transaction? Quote, a small matter, Steve replied swiftly, in a manner befitting his identity. It is our honor. Mr. Fool. Alger also stood, placed his right hand on his chest, and bowed. Steve pressed his right hand in the air and smilingly said, continue. Alger nodded, sat down, and turned to Audrey. If you can get the ghost shark blood, have someone deliver it to Warriors and the Sea Bar in Pelican Street, White Rose area of Prills Port. Tell the owner Williams that it's the captain's request. Once I confirm, will you send the potion formula to my address? Or should I tell you right here? Quote. Audrey thought for a moment, then with a smile replied, I choose the more secretive option. Right here, though it will test my memory. Now that Mr. Fool had agreed to witness the transaction, it implied there could be more such meetings in the future. Thinking this, she suddenly turned her head, her eyes gleaming as she made an intriguing proposal. Mr. Fool, would you mind if we have more of these experiments? Quote. Alger listened intently and was also moved, quickly adding, Mr. Fool, don't you find these gatherings quite interesting? Although your powers are beyond our imagination, there are always areas you are not familiar with or proficient in. The lady opposite clearly comes from a noble background, and I have my own unique experiences, insights, channels, and resources. Perhaps we could assist you with minor inconveniences in the future. Seeing himself involuntarily drawn here without any power to resist, he understood that the initiative lay with the enigmatic Mr. Fool. Therefore, it was better to further explore the benefits of this encounter to compensate for any disadvantages or vulnerabilities. The three sides at the long table had different backgrounds, resources, channels, and understandings of mysterious realms. If they could exchange information and cooperate to some extent, it could produce wonderfully unpredictable results. For instance, the resource exchange just agreed upon. Or if one wanted to kill someone, they could perfectly misdirect the situation by using a meeting member who had no apparent ties to them. The noble lady. Is my behavior, my accent that obvious? Audrey's mouth fell open in surprise, but she quickly recovered and nodded decisively. Mr. Fool, I think this is a great suggestion. As long as the meeting becomes regular, there are things that if you cannot personally attend to, you can entirely leave to us, within our capabilities. Of course. From that moment, Steve had been weighing the pros and cons. More meetings indeed meant gaining more profound arcane secrets and esoteric knowledge, which would help when he eventually returned to his time. Similarly, these could also provide useful information for his current real-life needs. However, more meetings could also more easily expose his true strengths and weaknesses. Indeed, in any world, there are no situations that come only with benefits. Steve again stretched out his right hand and tapped his fingers on the edge of the long table. Considering he controlled the convening and disbanding of the meetings, even if something were exposed, it would be within manageable limits. The benefits clearly outweighed the risks, and Steve quickly made a decision. He stopped his tapping, faced the four eager and anxious eyes, and smiled. I am a person who likes equivalent exchange. I won't let you help unconditionally. Every Monday, at 3 in the afternoon, try to be alone. After I attempt this a few times and figure some things out, perhaps you could take the day off in advance, so you don't have to worry about being in an inappropriate situation. This was his agreement to Alger and Audrey's proposal. Audrey, who had just turned 17 and was always pampered, felt a surge of excitement upon hearing Mr. Fool's response, and couldn't help but clench her fists and sway them in front of her chest. Should we also adopt code names? After all, we cannot use our real names for communication. Before Alger could speak, her eyes sparkled excitedly. Although her true circumstances might not be concealed from Mr. Fool, the person opposite also posed some danger. It was important he didn't know who she really was. Good idea, Steve answered briefly and casually. Audrey immediately began brainstorming aloud. You are Mr. Fool. From the tarot cards. So for a regular, long-term, secretive meeting, the code names should be consistent. I'll pick from the tarot cards too. Her tone grew cheerful. I've decided. My code name will be Justice. Single quote. This was one of the 22 major arcana cards. And what about you, sir? Audrey looked eagerly at her companion across the table. Alger frowned slightly, then relaxed and said, The Hanged Man. This was another of the major arcana cards. All right, then we are the founding members of the Tarot Club. Audrey blurted out joyfully, then hesitantly glanced at Steve, enveloped in the gray-white mist. Is that okay, Mr. Fool? Quote. Steve chuckled and shook his head. That's a minor detail. You can decide on your own. Thank you. Audrey was clearly excited. Then, she looked towards Alger. Mr. Hanged Man, could you repeat the address just now? I'm afraid my memory isn't strong enough. No problem. Alger was quite satisfied with Audrey's seriousness and repeated the address, after muttering it to herself 3 times. Audrey, still enthusiastic, said, I heard that tarot cards were originally invented by Emperor Russell as a game and don't actually have divinatory powers? Quote, no. Often divination comes from within. Everyone has a spirit, can empathize with the spirit world, and can receive information related to higher realms. But ordinary people can't perceive this, let alone interpret the hints they get when they use divinatory tools. These messages can manifest through the tools. A simple example is dreams and dream interpretation. Alger glanced at Steve, who showed no objection, and then debunked Audrey's claim. Tarot cards are actually such a tool, using more symbols and rational elements to help us interpret the hints more easily and accurately. Steve appeared casual but was listening very intently. Although the phenomenon of his mind drifting was becoming severe, and his head began to twitch in pain. I understand, Audrey nodded in agreement, then emphasized, that's not what I meant. I'm not questioning the tarot cards. I heard that Emperor Russell actually created another deck of cards. A secret one, symbolizing some unknown powers, consisting of 22 cards. After finishing it, he then invented the 22 major arcana of the tarot as a gaming tool. Is this claim accurate? Quote. She looked at Steve, hoping to get an answer from the mysterious Mr. Fool. Steve just smiled and didn't speak, turning his gaze towards the Hanged Man as if to test him. Alger instinctively straightened up and said solemnly, Yes. It's said that Emperor Russell saw the blasphemous tablets. And that deck contains the secrets of the 22 divine pathways. 22 divine pathways, Audrey repeated in a longing tone. At that moment, Steve's headache intensified, feeling the invisible connection between him, the deep red stars, and the gray-white mist beginning to waver. Let's conclude today's gathering here, he decided promptly and spoke in a low voice. As you wish, Alger bowed his head in respect. As you wish, Audrey echoed, the Hanged Man. She still had many questions and ideas, and was reluctant for the meeting to end. As Steve severed the connection, he smiled and said, "Let's look forward to our next gathering." The stars shone again, and the deep red light retracted like water. Audrey and Alger just heard Mr. Fool's words, and their figures became even more blurred, increasingly ethereal. In less than a second, the projection shattered, and above the gray mist, silence was restored. Steve felt himself rapidly becoming heavier. His surroundings flickered out of existence, and his vision first darkened, then was filled with brilliant sunlight. He was still in his apartment room, standing in the center. It's like a dream. What exactly is that gray mist world? And who or what power caused the changes just now? Steve murmured in a low voice, filled with confusion, his legs heavy as if filled with lead as he walked to his desk. He picked up the pocket watch he had left outside, checking how much time had passed. Time flows at a 1-to-1 ratio, Steve estimated. Putting down the watch, overwhelmed by splitting headaches, he could no longer hold himself up and sat down in the chair, lowering his head and using the thumb and middle finger of his left hand to massage his temples. After a long while, he suddenly sighed and said in Mandarin, "It seems I won't be able to go back any time soon." The ignorant are fearless. Having seen such magical things and learned about extraordinary realms and mysterious worlds, Steve dared not recklessly attempt the ancient Gufsic and rune transposition rituals. Who knows what else might happen? Perhaps even stranger, more terrifying, or even unbearable. At least I need to have a deep understanding of mysticism before trying, Steve thought. Reluctantly. Thankfully, the so-called meetings could provide some help. After another silence, he spoke to himself with a mix of disappointment, loss, pain, and melancholy. From now on, I am Klein. Klein tried to focus his thoughts back on methods and plans to dispel the negative emotions. Next week he might overhear the formula for the spectator potion. The recent meeting was truly magical, bringing people from different parts of the world together, making thousands of miles seem merely steps away, allowing face-to-face communication and mutual sharing. That sounds a bit familiar. Klein paused for a few seconds, then suddenly laughed, pressing his temples while murmuring self-mockingly, "Ever heard of online dating platforms?" Quote,